They read me my Miranda rights on my own front porch, two men in dark uniforms, badges gleaming under the porch light. But they weren't real cops, just actors sent by my HOA president to terrify me into submission. And when my wife opened the door wearing her federal badge, those officers bolted like scared kids who'd been caught playing dress-up. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a fight about flowers anymore. This was war. I should back up. My name's Tyler Howard. I'm 42. A history teacher, and until all this happened, the most exciting part of my week was grading essays about the American Revolution. My wife, Rachel, is... Well, at the time I thought she was just a government contractor who traveled a lot. We lived in Riverside Meadows, one of those beige suburban neighborhoods with cookie-cutter houses and manicured lawns. I thought planting 12 red geraniums in my front yard would finally make the place feel like home. They were on sale. They were beautiful, and I spent 3 hours kneeling in the dirt arranging them just right. It felt good, like I'd taken ownership of my little patch of earth. 2 days later, I got a letter. Violation of Community Standards Section 4.7. Prohibited plant species. Fine, $200. I read it 3 times thinking it had to be a joke. Geraniums. Seriously. I left a polite voicemail, explained I hadn't known the rule, offered to talk it through. No response. Instead, I got another letter this time accusing me of grass height violations. 1/4 inch too tall. Another $200 fine. Attached were photos someone had taken in my yard ruler and all. That night a man knocked on my door. Nervous mid-40s, couldn't look me in the eye. He introduced himself as Kyle, the HOA vice president. Said he was just delivering a friendly warning flowers had to go grass, had to be cut. Procedures must be followed. Then he practically sprinted back to his car like he was afraid to stay a second longer. So I went to the HOA meeting. I thought if I talked to them face-to-face, they'd be reasonable. That's when I met Brenda Mitchell. Perfect hair, icy smile, late 50s, running the meeting like she was presiding over the Supreme Court. When I explained my situation, she thanked me for my cooperation, suggested I hire my own inspector at my expense, of course, to make sure there weren't other violations we'd all missed. Her tone made it clear, not a suggestion, a threat. After the meeting, an older neighbor brushed past me and muttered, "My oak tree. They've been threatening me about it for 2 years. Be careful." That was it. He didn't even look back, and that was the first time I felt it, the chill of realizing everyone around me was too afraid to speak up. Then things got ugly. 2 a.m., I woke to footsteps on my porch. I peeked through the blinds and saw a hooded figure crouched by the steps. When I opened the door, I found a metal snap trap, the kind that can break fingers, waiting right where I'd step in the morning. A note tucked underneath. "Careful where you step." My hands shook as I held it. Someone wanted to hurt me. Over flowers. I called the police, reached out to a detective I'd once met through work. He showed up, glanced at the trap, and shrugged it off as probably kids. No fingerprints, no evidence bag, nothing. He suggested cameras. That's when it clicked, the system wasn't going to protect me. Maybe it never had. So I installed cameras. And sure enough, violations kept coming. Mailbox, 2 short house numbers, the wrong font, curb distance off by inches. It was endless. Then I noticed a black SUV parked near my house near the grocery store near school. Always the same one. I documented everything because by then I knew I'd need proof that I wasn't losing my mind. A neighbor finally whispered the truth. Brenda and that same detective were friendly, maybe too friendly. Suddenly, everything made sense. The HOA president, who'd lost her law license for ethics violations, had found a new kingdom to rule, and the cop I'd asked for help was on her payroll. The worst blow came in the form of a foreclosure threat. Pay nearly $5,000 in fines or lose my home. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I ran into Brenda at the grocery store. She leaned in close and said, almost pleasantly, "Your wife's government clearance depends on quiet lives. It'd be a shame if the wrong kind of attention found its way into her file." That night, 2 police officers pounded on my door, recited Miranda threatened arrest. It took me a minute to notice no radio sneakers instead of boots, sloppy uniforms. Watching the ring footage afterward, I realized they weren't cops at all. They were imposters sent to terrify me. And it worked. I stood there shaking for a long time, convinced my life was collapsing. And honestly, I thought about giving up. Sitting at my kitchen table with restraining order papers in front of me suspended from my teaching job, isolated in my own neighborhood. I asked myself if I'd brought this on myself, if maybe I should have just bought the white flowers like everyone else. I felt broken, completely alone. Then Rachel came home. I spilled everything: the trap, the fines, the fake cops, the restraining order. She listened, face unreadable, and finally said, "Tyler, I need to tell you the truth. I'm not a contractor. I'm FBI. Public Corruption Division." I actually laughed, at first thought she was joking. But she wasn't. She'd been undercover for 12 years. All those mysterious work trips, they weren't excuses. They were cases. And Brenda had just crossed a line, threatening a federal agent's spouse with fake officers. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. Then Kyle, the nervous HOA vice president, reached out. Said he couldn't stay quiet anymore. He handed us a USB drive with 3 years of recordings, Brenda blackmailing him, hiring investigators, scheming with the detective. He'd kept it all as insurance. And now he was ready to flip. Rachel laid out the plan. I'd go to the next HOA meeting, apologize, act defeated. She'd wire me up legal under state law. Brenda would gloat, threaten me again, maybe even mention Rachel. That would be enough to trigger a federal case. So I did it. I stood in front of that room, cheeks burning, and said I was sorry that I'd pulled the flowers, that I'd comply. Brenda smiled like a queen who'd just crushed a rebellion. Later in the parking lot, she leaned in close, whispered threats about Rachel's clearance, and slipped papers into my hand. It was all on tape. The FBI was ready to move. But desperate people are dangerous, and Brenda proved it the very next night when she hired the fake cops again. This time she wanted them to show up while both Rachel and I were home. 7:15 sharp pounding on the door. Rachel looked at me calm and cold. "Perfect timing," she said. She disappeared into the bedroom, came back seconds later with her badge clipped to her belt and her service weapon holstered. Then she opened the door wide. The two men froze. One stammered, "Oh man, that's the real FBI." The other actually raised his hands. Rachel's voice cut like steel. "Special Agent Rachel Winters, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Hands on your heads now." They cracked immediately, babbling about how Brenda Mitchell had paid them cash to play cops. The Ring camera caught everything. Faces, voices, confession. Then they bolted for their car tires, screeching down the street. Rachel turned to me, eyes blazing. "We've got her." Within hours, federal teams were surrounding Brenda's house. Through the windows, they saw her burning documents in the fireplace, shredders, jamming papers scattered everywhere. When agents broke down the door, she was standing in the ashes, wild-eyed hands black with soot. They cuffed her while she screamed about rights and lawyers, still clinging to the fantasy that she was untouchable. Rachel stepped into view, badge gleaming. Brenda's face collapsed into horror. Rachel's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You should have done your homework, Brenda. I'm not just some contractor's wife, I'm FBI. And you built your own prison brick by brick." Brenda went limp as the cuffs clicked tight. The neighborhood lights flickered across her face as they let her out, and for the first time in weeks I felt the weight lift off my chest. The fight that started with a handful of red flowers ended with an FBI takedown. And the lesson is simple. Bullies thrive on fear. But the moment you stop cowering, their power vanishes.